It's a crisp March morning in 2024, and I'm standing in my Raleigh apartment when a knock shakes my door. My parents and sister shivering, begging for help after years of pushing me away. I'm Marin, the kid they once told they'd be happier without, and right then, I slammed that door shut, feeling karma deal its hand. Back when I was 14, they adored Lorelei, their golden girl, while I faded into the shadows, until I walked out at 21. Built a life from nothing and watched them crumble. Why'd it take losing everything for them to see me? Stick around to find out how I turned their rejection into my freedom. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to let go to find yourself? Back in October of 2015, when the leaves turned a rusty orange outside our faded yellow house in Raleigh, I was 14 and coming to a hard truth. I'd sit at the kitchen table, pencil scratching across algebra problems, and feel the air shift whenever Lorelei breezed in. That night, I realized my parents loved her more than me. Not just a hunch, mind you, but a fact etched into every silence that hung over our dinner table. The pumpkin spice candles Mom lit flickered on the counter, casting a warm glow that never quite reached me. She was fussing with Lorelei's cheerleading skirt again, her laughter bouncing off the walls like it was the only sound that mattered. "Hold still, honey," she cooed, pinning the hem with careful fingers. My A+ report card sat untouched beside a bowl of mac and cheese gone cold. I'd worked hard for those grades, but they didn't earn me a glance. I kept my head down, tracing equations, hoping maybe this time she'd notice. The back door banged open and Lorelei stormed in, her blonde ponytail swinging, her voice sharp as a whip. "I flunked my math test, Mom! It's a disaster!" She flung her backpack onto the counter, knocking over a candle that sputtered out in a wisp of smoke. Mom spun around, hands on her hips. "Oh, sweetheart, how'd that happen?" Before Lorelei could answer, her eyes landed on me, narrowing. "Marin, why didn't you help your sister study? You know how important this is." My pencil froze mid-line, knuckles whitening as I gripped it tighter. "I had my own work," I muttered, barely loud enough to hear over Lorelei's dramatic sigh. Mom didn't blink, just turned back to Lorelei, smoothing her hair like I hadn't spoken. I stared at the page, numbers blurring, and felt that familiar ache settle in my chest. Later, we sat down to dinner. Meatloaf with gravy that lumped up on the plate, a side of corn I barely touched. Dad was there, hunched over his food, his fork scraping the dish in a steady rhythm. He hadn't said much since he got home from the hardware store, just nodded when Mom asked if he'd picked up extra candles. She was in full swing now, her voice bright as she leaned toward Lorelei. "You've got that star quality, honey. A little stumble in math won't dim it. Cheerleading's your ticket, you'll see." Lorelei beamed, twirling her fork like a baton. I pushed the corn around, each kernel a tiny weight, and kept my eyes on my plate. Dad didn't look up, didn't say a word, just scraped and ate. Then Lorelei leaned across the table, her smirk cutting through the candlelight. "Some people just fade into the background, don't they?" she said, voice dripping with something I couldn't name. Mom nodded, quick and sure, like it was the truest thing she'd heard all day. My fists clenched under the table, nails biting into my palms until they stung. I didn't dare look up, didn't want them to see the heat rising in my cheeks, the way my jaw tightened. Mom always said Lorelei was the one with potential, her golden girl, and I'd spent years swallowing that down. But that night, something shifted. I'd make them see they'd need me someday, even if it took everything I had. After the dishes were stacked in the sink, I slipped upstairs to my room, the house creaking under my steps. I flopped onto the bed, the worn quilt bunching beneath me, and stared at the ceiling. Cracks spider-webbed across the plaster, faint lines I'd traced 100 times before. The glow from those candles didn't reach up here, just left me in the dim hum of a quiet that pressed too close. Life's funny, isn't it? We start out thinking love's a given, but sometimes it's a prize you've got to fight for, or walk away from. I lay there, fingers still tingling from where my nails had dug in, wondering if I'd ever be more than a shadow to them, A whisper drowned out by Lorelei's shine. 7 years slipped by like pages in a book I didn't want to read, and there I was, 21, standing at the edge of everything I'd known. It was a muggy July night in 2022, the kind where the air stuck to your skin, and I'd had enough. I walked out of that peeling paint house in Raleigh with nothing but a backpack slung over my shoulder, because staying one more second meant disappearing for good. The crickets screamed outside, loud enough to drown out the rattle of our old AC, but not loud enough to quiet the storm brewing inside me. I was in my room, the one with the chipped blue walls and a single bulb flickering overhead, scrolling through community college notes on my phone. The summer heat pressed in, making my t-shirt cling, and I was trying to focus on a biology quiz I had coming up. Then the door banged open and Lorelei charged in, her voice shrill as she waved a crumpled paper. "I flunked my marketing class. Marin, and it's your fault. You distracted me." Her ponytail bounced with every wild gesture, her face red from yelling. Before I could even drop my phone, Mom stormed up the stairs behind her, finger jabbing the air. "We'd be happier without you," she snapped, her words slicing through the humid haze. I sat there, frozen, feeling the weight of years pile up. Every time she'd called Lorelei the one with potential echoing in my ears. I'd prove I had more than they ever saw, but right then, I just wanted out. Downstairs, Dad was parked at the kitchen table, hunched over a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The fluorescent light buzzed above him, casting shadows on his lined face as he stared into the dark liquid like it held answers. I grabbed my backpack from the corner of my room, the one I'd patched with duct tape last year, and started stuffing it. Jeans, a hoodie, my laptop with its cracked corner. My hands moved fast, but I hugged that bag tight to my chest for a moment, feeling its weight against my racing heart. Lorelei's whining faded into the background, Mom's voice a sharp hum I couldn't shake. I brushed past them, down the creaky steps, and Dad didn't look up. Not a word, not a glance. The screen door slammed behind me as I stepped into the sticky night, the sound ringing in my ears like a final note. I walked 3 blocks, sweat beading on my forehead, until I hit the motel off I-40, a low, sagging building with a neon sign buzzing, vacancy in flickers of pink and blue. The clerk behind the counter barely raised an eye from his magazine as I slid $50 across, my hands trembling from the tutoring cash I'd stashed away. He tossed me a key, and I found my room, number 12, with a door that stuck and a window that wouldn't open. Inside, the air smelled of stale cigarettes and damp carpet, but it was mine for the night. I dropped my backpack by the bed, the lumpy mattress sagging under me as I sank down. Mom's words hit me again out there in that motel lot. "We'd be happier without you," sharp as a slap, stinging worse than the summer heat. I swore to myself. Right then, I was done trying to please them. I'd carve my own path, even if it started here. Lying back, I stared at the stained ceiling, brown watermarks curling into shapes I couldn't name. The hum of the highway filtered through the thin walls, a steady drone that matched the ache in my chest. Sometimes you don't see how heavy a burden is until you set it down. I'd carried their indifference too long, and now I was free, or at least starting to be. My fingers still shook a little, tracing the edge of the quilt, and I wondered if they'd even notice I was gone. The crickets kept chirping outside, relentless. As I closed my eyes, the weight of that backpack still lingering like a promise I'd made to myself. By the time winter rolled into Raleigh in late 2022, I'd turned my knack for tutoring into a lifeline, a stubborn thread I clung to, because if Mom and Dad wouldn't give me a damn thing, I'd build it all myself. I'd left that peeling paint house behind, trading it for a shared apartment with creaky floors and walls so thin I could hear my roommates' late-night TV through them. The chill seeped in despite the rattling radiator, and I was 21, hunched over a rickety desk, teaching high school kids algebra online for $10 an hour. My diet was instant noodles, the kind you zap in a microwave that hummed louder than it worked, but every dollar I scraped together felt like a brick in a wall I was raising around myself. One December afternoon, I bundled up in a thrift store coat and trudged down to Starbucks on Hillsborough Street, where the warm lights glowed like a promise against the gray sky. I'd come for the free Wi-Fi, my laptop balanced on a wobbly table, its screen littered with stickers from old-school projects. A barista with a messy bun and a name tag reading Tessa slid a drip coffee my way, her eyes catching on those stickers. "Those are cool. Where'd you get 'em?" she asked, her voice bright over the hum of the espresso machine. I shrugged, cradling the cup's warmth in my hands, and mumbled something about high school. She grinned, leaning on the counter. "You look like someone with a plan." I didn't know it then, but Tessa, all of 23 and chatty as a morning bird, was about to become the first real friend I'd had in ages. Lorelai used to laugh at my nerdy grades. Would she choke on that laugh when they started paying my rent? Back at that table, I spent hours hunched over my screen, building an SAT prep course from scratch. My notes sprawled across the table, dog-eared pages of math tricks and grammar rules I'd mastered years ago. My fingers tapped nervously on the wood, a jittery rhythm as I hesitated over the publish button. Tessa wandered by with a rag, wiping down a spill, and caught my eye. "Go for it," she said, flashing that grin again. "What's the worst that could happen?" I pressed the button, the screen blinking to life with my little creation, and she let out a whoop that turned heads. I couldn't help it. A small laugh escaped me, the first in months. The coffee grew cold as I watched sign-ups trickle in, one by one, kids from all over Raleigh desperate for a leg up. It wasn't much, but it was mine. By July 2023, those trickles turned into a stream. 10 clients, steady gigs, enough cash to ditch the shared apartment for a tiny studio off Glenwood Avenue. The place was a box, barely bigger than my old bedroom, with a window that stuck half open and a sink that dripped. I didn't care. It was my name on the lease. Tessa showed up on moving day, hauling a thrift store lamp up the narrow stairs, its chipped shade wobbling with every step. "This place screams Marin's Empire," she joked, setting it down with a flourish. I plugged it in, the soft glow spilling across the bare walls, and felt a weight lift I hadn't known I was carrying. We sat on the floor that night, eating takeout pizza straight from the box, and I let myself dream a little, about more clients, more courses, a life I'd stitched together from nothing. Then one evening, as the summer sun dipped low, my phone pinged with my first PayPal sale. $50 from some kid named Ethan who'd aced his practice test. I was at Starbucks again, the familiar hum of chatter around me, and I flashed a rare smile across the counter at Tessa. She clinked her cup against mine, the coffee sloshing a bit, and said, "You're unstoppable now, you know that." My chest swelled, a quiet pride pushing out the old ache. I'd done this. No help, no handouts, just me and a stubborn streak wider than the Tar River. Hard times can break you, or they can teach you to stand taller. I was learning the latter, one shaky step at a time. My phone stayed dead quiet from home. No texts, no calls from Mom or Dad or Lorelai. And as I watched Tessa scribble a doodle on a napkin, I wondered what they'd think if they peeked at my life now. January 10th, 2024, crept up on me like a shadow I couldn't shake. And there I was, 22, settled into my little studio in Raleigh, when my phone lit up with Mom's name. It buzzed on the table, a sharp crack slicing through the piece I'd fought so hard to build, and I froze, staring at it as frost crept up the windows like fragile lace. The space heater hummed in the corner, a feeble defense against the winter chill, and I pulled my scarf tighter around my neck, the wool scratching my skin. I'd made something of myself, clients, a course, a life, and yet here they were, reaching through the wires to drag me back. I'd been hunched over my laptop all morning, tweaking my SAT prep course, adding a new section on geometry that I hoped would pull in more students. The glow of the screen lit up the tiny room, my breath puffing out in faint clouds as I typed. Then that first buzz came, then another, until 6 missed calls stacked up in an hour, each one a jab at the quiet I'd carved out. I sighed, fingers hovering over the keys, and finally swiped to answer. Mom's voice spilled out, frantic and tear-soaked. "Sweetie, "We're in trouble. Lorelei's out of school," she sobbed, the words tumbling over each other. "She couldn't keep up, and we're drowning in bills." I leaned back in my chair, the scarf tightening as I tugged it, staring at the frost patterns curling across the glass instead of responding. Lorelei's old taunt, not worth the effort, danced in my head, laughable now that they were the ones begging. Before I could find words, Lorelei's voice cut in, whiny and thin through the speaker. "I messed up, Marin, okay? I need help. We need help." She sounded smaller than I remembered, no trace of that smug edge she'd wielded like a blade when we were kids. Mom jumped back in, her pleas piling up. "The tuition debts are crushing us and the heat's about to go out. Please, we need cash." I could picture her wringing her hands, pacing the kitchen where Dad probably sat silent, just like always. My fingers dug into the scarf's edge, pulling it taut until it bit into my neck, and I stayed quiet, letting their voices fill the cold air. "Don't abandon us," Mom begged, her tone cracking like ice underfoot. I pressed the end call button, the screen going dark, and shoved the phone under a cushion on the couch, my breath fogging in front of me as I exhaled hard. I stood there for a moment, the heater's hum the only sound, their words echoing in my skull like a song I couldn't unhear. Part of me wanted to yank the phone back out, to listen again, maybe even soften. But then I straightened up, loosening the scarf with a slow, deliberate tug. A smug twist curled in my gut, sharp and satisfying. They needed me now, not the other way around, and that flipped every script they'd ever written for me. I stepped to the window, tracing a finger along the frosty edge, watching my breath melt a small circle on the pane. Life has a way of turning tables, doesn't it? You spend years carrying someone else's load, only to find they can't stand without it. I wasn't their crutch anymore, and that truth warmed me more than the heater ever could. The cushion muffled another buzz, the phone vibrating stubbornly beneath it, and I turned away, crossing my arms against the chill. I'd hung up on them, sure, but their voices lingered, a mix of panic and guilt I hadn't asked for. My laptop sat open, the SAT course glowing on the screen, a quiet proof of what I'd built without them. Tessa had texted earlier a simple, "You okay?" that I hadn't answered yet, and I thought about her hauling that lamp up my stairs, calling this place an empire. Maybe it was, small as it was. The phone buzzed again, insistent, and I glanced at the couch, wondering if they'd ever stop, or if I'd ever want them to. March 15th, 2024, broke open with a pale sun climbing over Raleigh, and I was 23, settled into my high-rise apartment, when a sharp knock rattled my door. I stood there, mid-bite into a peanut butter sandwich, as sunlight spilled through the big windows, painting golden stripes across the hardwood. A podcast hummed low on my phone, some gentle voice talking about self-growth, but that knock cut through it like a jagged edge. I peeked through the peephole, and there they were. Mom, Dad, and Lorelei shivering in thin jackets, looking like ghosts who'd wandered too far from home. Karma, it seemed, had finally laid its cards on the table, and I wasn't sure I was ready to play. I'd been up early, the kind of morning where the air feels crisp even inside, and I'd made that sandwich with bread a little stale, smearing it thick to cover the taste. The podcast was a habit now, something to fill the quiet while I scrolled through emails, mostly SAT course sign-ups, a steady hum of progress. Then came that knock, firm and insistent, and I set the sandwich down on the counter, wiping my hands on my jeans as I crossed the room. Through the peephole, Mom's sunken eyes hit me first, hollowed out like she hadn't slept in weeks, and Dad stood beside her, shoulders slumped in a coat too big for him now. Lorelei hovered behind, her blonde hair flat and lifeless, staring at her boots. Mom's old line, "We'd be happier without you," slammed back into me, a memory from that sticky July night, and I gripped the doorknob, steadying myself against the flood of it. I cracked the door just enough, the chain still latched, and Mom's voice spilled out, raw and desperate. "Marin, we've lost the house," she said, her hands twisting together. "Lorelei's future's gone. She can't go back to school. We need help." Dad's voice croaked out next, rough as gravel, the first I'd heard from him in years. "Please, kid, he rasped, his eyes darting away like he couldn't bear to meet mine. Lorelei shuffled forward, her head down, muttering, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for this." Her apology hung there, thin and frayed, and I stood frozen, the sandwich still halfway to my mouth in my mind's eye. A flash hit me. Mom's rare smile at my 10th birthday, handing me a slice of cake with a candle flickering, her laugh soft for once. My chest tightened, a flicker of doubt tugging at me, but then I shook it off, jaw clenching. "You had your chance," I snapped, my voice harder than I meant it to be, and I slammed the door shut, the bang echoing through the apartment. My hands trembled as I dropped the bread onto the counter, crumbs scattering like tiny confessions. Their voices seeped through anyway, muffled pleas bouncing off the wood. Mom's begging, Dad's low murmur, Lorelei's shaky breath. I turned away, cranking up the podcast until that calm voice drowned them out, talking about letting go of what doesn't serve you. I stood straighter, shoulders squaring, and felt freedom sweep through me, sharp and clean, tasting better than any guilt I might have swallowed. They'd pushed me out, built their world around Lorelei's shine, and now it was crumbling. They couldn't lean on me to prop it up. I crossed to the window, sunlight warming my face, and watched a pigeon strut along the ledge outside. Sometimes the hardest doors to close are the ones you never fully opened. I'd locked this one for good, and the quiet that followed was mine to keep. But they didn't leave right away. I could hear them out there. A faint shuffle of feet, a choked sob from Mom that cut through the podcast's hum. I slid my phone onto the counter, the screen dark, and ran a hand through my hair, tugging at the roots. Tessa's text from January still sat unanswered. "You okay?" And I wondered what she'd say if she saw me now, standing tall while they lingered like shadows beyond my door. The begging faded, but their presence clung, heavy as the frost I'd traced months ago. I glanced at the sandwich, its edges curling up, and left it there, untouched. They were still out there. Would karma finish them off? Or was this just the start of something I couldn't yet see? By November 20th, 2024, the crisp fall air swept through Raleigh, and I stood in my balcony apartment, 23 and finally free, their silence ringing in my ears like a prize I'd earned. The months since that March morning had stretched long and quiet. No more knocks, no more pleas, and I knew karma had tied up every loose end I'd left behind. I leaned against the railing, the city skyline twinkling below, and felt the weight of years lift, replaced by a lightness I hadn't known I could claim. Inside, a folding table groaned under a Thanksgiving spread, turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, its steam curling into the air, a testament to the life I'd built without them. The SAT course had taken off like wildfire, hundreds of students signing up, their payments flowing through PayPal in steady pings that still made me smile. I'd spent the morning fussing over the turkey, basting it with butter until the skin turned golden, while Tessa buzzed around, her cheerful chatter filling the room. She'd brought a pecan pie, its crust flaky and sweet, and set it on the counter with a proud grin. "You're hosting your first big Thanksgiving, Marin. Look at you go," she said, her voice warm as the oven's glow. A handful of new friends trickled in, folks I'd met through tutoring gigs and late-night chats at the community center, carrying bowls of green beans and a jug of cider. We laughed over the pie, Tessa teasing me about my shaky knife skills, and I felt a glow settle in my chest, brighter than the candles flickering on the table. Lorelei's smirk from that old dinner table, sharp and cutting, was a faded memory now. They'd lost it all, and I'd found my footing. Midway through the meal, as I scooped a heap of stuffing onto my plate, my phone buzzed against the counter. I glanced over, fork paused, and saw Mom's name flash up. A text, short and stark. "We're evicted. Lorelei's at a gas station job. Please." My jaw tightened, the stuffing sage and butter turning heavy on my tongue. Tessa caught my eye across the table, her brow furrowing, but I shook my head, brushing crumbs off my sweater with a quick swipe. I tapped the screen, deleted the message mid-bite, and let it vanish into the hum of laughter around me. They'd made their bed years ago, piling it high with Lorelei's shine in my shadows. I wasn't about to climb in and fix it. I pushed my plate forward, reaching for the cider instead, and let the warmth of the room wash over me. Later, as the plate stacked up and the chatter softened, I set the table for dessert, my hands moving on autopilot. Out of habit, I pulled an extra plate from the cabinet, its white edge cool against my fingers, and placed it down, a ghost of old routines. Then I paused, staring at it, the empty circle stark against the cluttered spread. Tessa sidled up, a glass of cider in hand, and nudged me with her elbow. "To new beginnings," she said, raising it with a smile that crinkled her eyes. I nodded, a small, firm motion, and lifted the plate, stacking it back in the cabinet with a quiet clink. The door shut, and with it, something sealed tight inside me, closure, hard-won, and mine alone. Their last plea was gone, erased from my phone, and I stepped onto the balcony, the fall air brushing my face as I breathed deep. Karma hadn't needed my help to finish them. It had done its work, steady and sure. The skyline stretched out, lights winking against the dusk, and I leaned on the railing, the cider's tang still on my lips. Tessa's laughter drifted out from inside, mingling with the rustle of leaves below, and I felt rooted, solid in a way I hadn't before. You don't always see freedom coming. It slips in quiet between the cracks of what you've lost and what you've built. I grinned at the Raleigh skyline, the curve of it steady and familiar, and didn't wonder if they'd crawl back begging. That door was shut, locked tight. What nagged at me now was how I'd ever let them weigh me down so long, when this life, this peace, was waiting all along. As I stood on that balcony, the Raleigh skyline glowing soft against the November dusk, I realized their silence wasn't just my freedom. It was the end of a long road I'd walked alone. Lorelei's smirk and Mom's cold words had faded into lessons I didn't expect. Family isn't always about blood. It's about who lifts you up when the days get heavy. Looking back, I see now that letting go can be the kindest gift we give ourselves. And maybe, in time, others too. If this little tale of mine stirs something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. After all, we're all just trying to find our way, aren't we?